So, before we begin an entire course on learning and memory, we probably should define what we mean by learning and memory. I think oftentimes when we think of learning, we're thinking of a student in a class learning their ABCs, or a memory we need to answer questions on exam, or remembering a phone number, remembering where you lived, or thinking back to that wonderful vacation you had. Right? That's what we think of as learning, but it's certainly more complex than that. So we can differentiate between unconscious memories and conscious memories. I think the things I was talking about just a second ago was conscious. I consciously think about that vacation I took, or what my brother's face looks like, or trying to remember that fact for an exam. We bring it up to a conscious level. But we have a lot of memories we don't easily access. We don't know really are there. These are unconscious memories. Now, unconscious memories, or the unconscious, has a long history in psychology, all dating all the way back to Freud. But it's really just things that influence our behaviors that we really don't have a lot of awareness of. We bring up to conscious. And consciousness and conscious memories and unconscious memories, it's not good to really think of them as one or the other. It's more of a spectrum between the two. There's been some really nice quotes about the conscious mind, right? So here's a professor from Yale. He says, as Galileo removed the earth from its privileged position at the center of the universe, so this intellectual revolution removes the conscious mind from its privileged place as the center of human behavior. All we can think about is our conscious mind, right? That's what we bring up to awareness. And we think that that is dictating all of our behavior, or it's all of our thoughts, when we have a lot going on at the unconscious level that is highly influential of our behavior and our ideas that we aren't really aware of. I would have to say that a big portion of this class is about the unconscious mind. Here's another quote that came out of a book by David Brooks called The Social Animal. I kind of like this. If the conscious mind is like a general atop a platform who sees the world from a distance and analyzes things linearly and linguistically, the unconscious mind is like a million little scouts. They maintain no distance from the environment around them, but are immersed in it. They scurry about, interpreting other minds, landscapes, and ideas. What this is saying is, sure, we can bring up into our conscious mind a memory, a face, some food we like, but what we don't realize is there's so much going on at a much deeper level that is getting influenced by the environment around us at a level we aren't aware of. We're going to spend a lot of time in this class talking about that distinction. So if it's a little confusing now, hopefully it'll clear up a little as we go. So, when do we see these influences of learning, even at an unconscious level? Well, advertisements for sure. Right? So this on the left was Joe Camel. You don't see Joe Camel anymore, but boy, Joe Camel was around a lot in the 1980s and really influenced a lot of teenagers to start smoking because Joe Camel was so cool and Joe Camel was very recognizable. The Marlboro Man, that's been around forever, right? Thinking of smoking and the outdoors and being rugged. Smoking has nothing to do with those. But we make those connections because they're in advertisements. We see this all the time in other forms of advertisement. Sex is often used in advertisement. What sex has anything to do with cheeseburgers? I don't understand. But we still have a lot of ads like this one on the right where they take an attractive model and a cheeseburger. And you connect the two at an unconscious level. And you don't think, I'm going to go over to Carl's Jr. because I think I'm going to meet this pretty model. No, it's just a connection where the cheeseburger and something good and Carl's Jr. and something good just connects and influences behavior, right? So we use sex appeal, right? This is David Beckham, soccer player David Beckham. Very attractive, and you're associating his attraction with this type of cologne. We see this a lot in politics as well. Candidates are always connecting themselves to things they want you to connect, right? So here's candidate Donald Trump and an eagle, or Donald Trump and the American flag, or money. You're connecting those two. Now, at a conscious level, you're not saying, well, Donald Trump has an eagle, so he's patriotic. No, it's at a level you aren't aware of. We see this with all candidates, right? They oftentimes put in the background something very patriotic, or people from diverse backgrounds, or whatever you want to connect or associate. We're going to use the word associate a lot in this class. It's where we connect things really at an unconscious level, and yet it still influences our behavior. So let's differentiate here. We have what are known as declarative memories. Sometimes we use the word explicit memories. These are memories that we can bring up into our conscious mind. Facts for an exam. Learning the information in this lecture, right? The word declarative memory. Maybe you haven't used that before, but now here it is in a lecture, and you're writing notes and you're trying to remember it, because you might have an exam someday where I ask questions about what is a declarative memory, right? This can be your address when you were a child. This could be the movie you saw last week. It's something you bring up to your awareness. And a field or a course that might deal a lot with how these memories are formed, how they're retrieved, the different types of declarative memory. We have short-term and long-term declarative memories. We have episodic memories, memories of an episode, memories of something that happened to you in the past, right? That class is probably going to be cognitive psychology, and not necessarily this class. This class is going to deal a little bit more with unconscious memories. Sometimes we call them non-declarative or implicit memories. Memories, or something that you've learned that motivates behavior that we don't control very easily or understand or bring up to a conscious level. We'll talk a lot about this, how these are formed, how they're retrieved, all those kinds of things. Sometimes a type of non-declarative memory may be a procedural memory, something that you have practiced, right? These are motor memories, something if you're really good at texting, you don't think about it anymore. You don't bring up to consciousness, oh, my thumb needs to go on the A and my other thumb needs to go on the L. These are you just whiz them out really fast. When you're riding a bike, when you're driving a car, you are just doing these things because stimuli in your environment, things in your environment are eliciting these memories and these actions. So, somebody who is really good at some type of athletics, like here we are, synchronized springboard diving or gymnastics, you do it over and over and over again. You don't read about being a gymnast. You don't take a lecture about being a gymnast. You do this action over and over and over, and eventually these procedural memories are something you don't think about. We're going to give a lot of examples about this as well. Like a baseball player, for example. You ask a baseball player who hits the ball, what are you thinking about when you're up at the plate and hitting the ball? And they're like, I don't think. I've just had thousands and thousands of balls pitched at me, and I've swung at those, and sometimes I hit them and sometimes I don't, and I just get better and better by doing it a lot. These are still memories. These are still changes in behavior because of experiences, but it's not something that you bring up to consciousness. What about learning in physiology? Our physiological systems, our hormones, our digestive systems, these are all regulated and influenced by learning, by past experiences, by stimuli in the environment. For example, if you walk into Kentucky Fried Chicken and you like Kentucky Fried Chicken and you've had Kentucky Fried Chicken in the past, those 11 herbs and spices are wafting into your nose. Well, your brain has had experience with this. They say, okay, at an unconscious level, whenever I smell Kentucky Fried Chicken with its 11 herbs and spices, I'm going to start eating it. Well, that memory sends information down to your pancreas to release digestive hormones like insulin and glucagon, and your stomach gets these hormones and hydrochloric acid is released, and you have these digestive enzymes. In other words, your whole body is preparing for this food that's coming. It might even start binding up free sugars in your system because it says, oh, I'm going to get more food here in a second. So smelling food makes you hungry in many ways. One of the ways is it just sort of starves your blood of this sugar it needs because it thinks it's going to get it in the future. You salivate, right? These are conditioned responses. These are an association that you've made with food and the smell, and that food's coming, so you start preparing for it. You don't do this at a conscious level. Can anybody here think for a moment and cause your pancreas to release insulin just by thinking about it? Or digestive enzymes from your small intestine? No, you can't do that. You don't have conscious control over these things. But these are powerful influences of behavior. Now, often both explicit, conscious memory, and implicit, unconscious memories influence behavior at the same time. They're interacting. We just tend to think that our conscious memory, our conscious thoughts, our explicit thoughts are what's controlling everything because we have awareness of it. But actually, most of what influences your behavior, changes your behavior, even changes your thoughts, even changes and alters your conscious thoughts, these are mostly implicit, unconscious memory. That's the lion's share of how you react to the world around you. That's why we need an entire class to talk about theories of how these things happen. So here's an example of kind of conscious and unconscious interacting, right? These motivations that you get from the things you learn at a conscious level. You might go to a casino and go, oh, I have lots of fun there. I have good memories of going there. I won this jackpot. I played with my friends. I had this great time. But the slot machine is also designed, engineered to motivate your behavior at a level you aren't aware of, at an unconscious memory to influence you staying at that machine, pressing those buttons, losing a lot of money. This is all because we have a really good understanding of how unconscious memories influence behavior. We're going to talk about that a lot in this class. Learning and addiction. I think most people would say substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, a drug addiction is all because of the drug itself. That drug is going to the brain. That drug is influencing dopamine or whatever. It is the drug. But we're going to learn in this class that learning, unconscious learning, and its influence of motivation that influences addiction is based on principles of learning more than it's based on principles of psychopharmacology or chemistry. So this shows that learning, this simple stuff of learning, can influence behavior so much that it can cause somebody to forego their own health, forego the health of their family, die from it. That's how motivating learning can be. We're going to talk about that. So I don't want you just, when we talk about these theories and examples and research, we're going to talk about work by Ivan Pavlov and his dog and rats in a maze and pressing levers to try to understand the very basic principles and rules that govern learning. But you need to understand something really important. These rules govern your behavior to the point that you might do something like addiction or buy stuff you don't need or vote for people or all these kinds of things. impact your life in every way possible. To understand how it does that, we're going to have to understand some basic principles in learning. What about communicating with other people? We're a social animal, and you might be talking to somebody, and you might say something that they find just a little offensive. You tell a joke or something, and they might not come out to you and say, "Excuse me, I find that joke to be offensive. That's an offensive joke and you need to stop." And you take that and you go, "Oh, okay, thank you. I'm going to consciously not do that." They simply reward you or they punish you. How do they reward you? You say something and they have a genuine smile. And their eyes crinkle and their mouth opens up a little bit, and you get a little reward from that. You don't think consciously, "I'm going to tell that joke in the future because everybody laughed." You just get a little reward, and you tend to increase that behavior. Or they might look at you a little bit like, "Yeah, no, yeah," just a little. The eyebrows come down a little bit, or they have no real emotions. They're punishing you, not hitting you over the head with something. Not shocking you with an electric prod. They're just giving you a little punishment like, "What you said didn't work for me." And you don't consciously say, "I noticed that what I said didn't work for them." But the unconscious mind does. And it tends not to do that behavior in their presence or other people in the future. And you didn't even know why, right? So interaction, social communication is based on learning. So what is learning? It's not easily defined. This is a really long definition I found in a book, and it's fine. Learning is a relatively enduring change in the potential to engage in a particular behavior resulting from experience with environmental events specifically related to that event. That's a lot. I kind of like the shortened version. Learning is a persistent change in behavior with experience. We have an experience. We interact with our environment, and our behavior and our thoughts change because of that. That's learning. It doesn't have to be at a conscious level, but it can be. We also know that learning is not easily observed because that's happening in the brain, in the mind. Changes are happening at the neurons in the brain. So we have to be careful to talk about the learning performance distinction. Right now, unless you're stuck in an MRI machine, and even then it doesn't work well, we only look at performance. We only look at changes. In a laboratory, it's how fast a rat went through a maze or pressed a lever or salivation or fear response or whatever. We're going to talk a lot about that. We can only look at behavior. And from behavior, we can infer learning. We can infer that there's been something changed in the brain. But sometimes we get changes in the brain, learning. We don't really see a performance change. And I'll talk about that in this class. We call that the learning performance distinction. And it makes us have to be a little bit careful with just saying behavior is automatically a perfect reflection of learning. It's a good mirror of learning. And we can say, okay, learning is taking place, but there's other stuff that might be going on. Performance is used to provide evidence of learning. And that's what we'll be doing a lot in this class. So, why are we studying learning? I've kind of given you some ideas, but these basic principles of learning play a big role in education, K through 12 education, college education. Child development. Child development, those first few years of a child, they are just associating things and connecting things, and they really don't have much of a conscious mind, a little bit. But we don't have a lot of conscious memories of before the age of 3. Do you have a memory of when you were 1 year old, 2 years old? Do you have any? Can you bring that up? You might start thinking, oh, I can think about this time in my conscious mind when I was interacting with my mom and I was a tiny little kid. You're probably over 3 when that memory occurred. Mental health. We talked about drug addiction, drug tolerance. These are learning principles. These are learning things. Phobias. Anybody here listening to this have a phobia? We'll talk about phobias in this class. But phobias make a really good example of that conscious, unconscious influence. So let's say somebody's arachnophobic. They're fear of spiders. The conscious, logical, rational mind says, there's a spider on the floor, and I am 5'10", and I have a big boot, and I'll walk over and I'll step on that spider, and I win. I am bigger, I am stronger, I cannot be defeated by a spider. Or, I see that spider, it's a harmless spider, won't hurt me, fine. But if somebody really has a strong connection with the sight of a spider causing overwhelming fear, that wins. That will win out. Your conscious mind cannot control that. Similar to addiction. The conscious mind say, if I take this drug, I'm going to fall off the wagon and I'm going to have these terrible problems with my life. I know that consciously, and yet relapse from addiction is very common. This is that kind of difference between those two. A lot of forms of therapy use these basic principles of learning. If you want to help to reduce somebody's phobia, you can use learning principles that we talk about in this class to reduce their fear. Fear of going outside, fear of a spider, fear of whatever. Phobias are really bad. If you want to help somebody with addiction, you're going to use basic principles of learning to help reduce the cravings for addiction. We also know behavioral modification, applied behavioral analysis. This is a good way to help children on the autism spectrum or children with difficulties in school. You're going to use basic principles we talk about in this class of Pavlovian learning, Thorndikean learning, Skinnerian learning. These are all very important in helping children. So applied behavioral analysis uses that. Behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. These are all using principles of learning. Because if we want to change behavior for the better, we're probably going to have to tap into the unconscious mind and modify that, less so than the conscious mind. And this class is about that. And of course, advertisement, industry, all that kind of stuff. This is all based on learning principles. And then finally, I just think this stuff is interesting. This is what I did, in my research. This is what I still do, and I did it for my PhD. I just think this stuff is interesting. Tapping into the unconscious mind. I'm also a big fan of animals and animal behavior, so I like to do this as well. All right. That's a little bit of an introduction to just this basic idea of learning and memory, and I'm hoping you're getting this idea that we are not going to be dealing a lot with our conscious awareness of memory, but at that level that's much deeper.